tab to activate.
Hello students, in this video we are going to discuss about William Shakespeare as a dramatist. William Shakespeare, as we all know, was born in 1564 and he demised in 1616. He wrote a total of 38 plays. The first folio edition of Shakespeare, which was published in 1623, consisted of 36 plays. Later on, the play Pericles was added to this list, and the 38th play being The Distressed Lover or Double Falsehood. Later on, in his poem Marina, the famous 20th century critic and poet T.S. Eliot used the character Marina from the play Pericles. Pericles talks about the loss of a daughter at a very young age as a child, and this daughter is Marina, and she is rediscovered in her adulthood. And this rediscovering is equated by T.S. Eliot to religious awakening. The four dark tragedies of Shakespeare are Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth, and King Lear. Hamlet is the longest play of Shakespeare, and the shortest play, or the shortest tragedy rather, of Shakespeare is Macbeth. The shortest play of Shakespeare is Comedy of Errors. The character Balthazar appears in Comedy of Errors, the Spanish tragedy by Thomas Kyd, and Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. The famous quote which appears in Merchant of Venice is, "Mercy, the quality of mercy is twice blessed." Here the character Portia disguises herself as a lawyer named Balthazar to argue in favor of her husband's friend. In Hamlet, the important characters are Prince Hamlet, his uncle Claudius, his mother Gertrude. His ladylove Ophelia dies even before the death of Hamlet, and the tragic flaw, the hamartia of Hamlet is procrastination, that is delayed action. In Hamlet and His Problems, T.S. Eliot analyzes the play Hamlet, and he says, he even argues that Hamlet is half mad and half pretends to be mad. And he argues that Hamlet's madness rather increases the suspicion of Claudius. Claudius' suspicion increases just because of Hamlet's act of trying to pretend to be mad. And as I told you, T.S. Eliot calls Hamlet as half mad and half pretends to be mad. The famous concept of objective correlative appears in Hamlet and His Problems by T.S. Eliot, where he talks about Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking and washing of hands as objective correlative for mental disturbance and guilty conscience, respectively, as objective correlatives. See, objective correlative is just like your WhatsApp status. To convey what is there in the mind of a character, people try to convey the mood through a WhatsApp status. Similarly, an external object or event, action, is used by the playwright to tell what is there in the mind of the character. Say, for example, Lady Macbeth's say guilty conscience. She actually does not commit the murder. It is in fact Macbeth who goes on to kill King Duncan. But she says that her hand is stained with blood, and even perfumes from Arabia cannot sweeten her hands. And this actually shows her guilty conscience. So her guilty conscience is the objective, is conveyed through an objective correlative. The guilty conscience in her mind, within her, is conveyed through, to understand brain need not be equated with mind. All right. So we do not know where exactly is the mind. Never mind. All right. So the guilty conscience within, say, Lady Macbeth is conveyed through an external act called washing of hands, and the mental disturbance inside the body of, say, Lady Macbeth is conveyed through the objective correlative called sleepwalking. It's an external action. And T.S. Eliot goes on to say that Hamlet is an artistic failure. Hamlet, as you know, is the longest play of Shakespeare. The shortest play of Shakespeare is the shortest tragedy of Shakespeare is Macbeth, and the shortest work or the play of Shakespeare is the Comedy of Errors. The character Balthazar appears there, and Balthazar also appears in The Merchant of Venice and the Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd. Actually, in The Merchant of Venice, Portia disguises herself as a male named Balthazar, as a lawyer, to argue in favor of her husband's friend. And the famous quote, "The quality of mercy is twice blessed," appears in The Merchant of Venice. Hamlet, the subtitle is The Prince of Denmark, and in the 20th century, a famous absurd drama titled Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Thomas Stoppard was based on the characters in the play Hamlet. In Hamlet, there is this concept called play within a play. And the play within a play that appears in Hamlet is Mousetrap. Later on, Agatha Christie came up with the work Mousetrap. And in the Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd, there is this concept of play within a play. And the title of that play within a play is Soliman and Persida. I think Soliman and Persida. It's a play within a play in the work The Spanish Tragedy by Thomas Kyd. And this play within a play, alright, this concept of play within a play is entirely different from this concept of an interlude. See, interlude is play within acts. An example for interlude would be Fulgence and Lucrece by Thomas Medwall. The next work is Othello, which is subtitled The Moor of Venice, and King Lear, the famous quote, "Oh, my poor foolish hand," appears there, and the name of the daughter who is very faithful to King Lear is Cordelia, and later on, a happy ending was given to King Lear by I think Newham Tate. Right? A writer named Newham Tate gave a happy ending to the play King Lear. And for Romeo and Juliet, a happy ending was given by George Benda. George Benda gave a happy ending to the play Romeo and Juliet. And in Macbeth, the famous line, "Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing," appears. And from this line, or from these words, William Faulkner has taken the title for his work, The Sound and the Fury. As you know, the title, Brave New World, by Aldous Huxley, has been taken from The Tempest. The title, Under the Greenwood Tree, by Thomas Hardy, has been taken from a song in As You Like It. And in Macbeth, it is the three witches who initially say, "Foul is fair and fair is foul." All right, fair is foul and foul is fair, rather. And these three witches, they disguise, or they deceive Macbeth. And what do they say through their prophecy? Macbeth will be the future king of Scotland. By then, it was King Duncan who was the king of Scotland, and they prophesy that Macbeth will be the future king of Scotland, and Banquo's children will become the future rulers of Scotland. And unfortunately, Macbeth is not able to read between the lines. He is not able to understand the real meaning of those words, and therefore he is tricked. It is the overvaulting ambition which was Macbeth's downfall. And later on, the witches, they prophesy that no man born out of a woman can harm Macbeth, but it was Macduff who turns out to be lethal and who kills Macbeth, because Macduff was not born out of a woman, rather he was taken out of the womb of a woman through cesarean birth. And the title of Macbeth, the name of Macbeth's castle is Inverness, and in the name of the woods is Birnam Woods. The witches say only when Birnam Woods walk towards your castle Inverness, you will be in trouble. And how do Birnam Woods walk? The people, the soldiers who come along with Macduff, in order to protect themselves, they cover themselves with leaves. And it seems as if the whole Birnam Woods is moving towards Inverness. And that is how Macbeth is tricked. And later on, Elsie Knight came up with a work called How Many Children Had Lady Macbeth? And this particular work does not have anything to say with the number of children Lady Macbeth had. It is rather a satirical, mockery made on the critics of his period, of the period of Elsie Knight, where this critic tries to mock at the critics. They are not focusing on serious issues like theme and all that. Rather, their focus is trivial. And Elsie Knight says there will be one point where these critics will even focus on the number of children Lady Macbeth had. You will not get an answer for how many children Lady Macbeth really had. That is not the objective. It is rather a title used to ridicule the nature of criticism that was going on. So this was Elsie Knight, and Thomas De Quincey came up with a work, Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth. This scene, Act 2, Scene 3. This is a scene exactly after the assassination of King Duncan. And what does Shakespeare do according to De Quincey? He shifts the mood from, say, a very, very tragic, horrorsome mood to a sort of a comic relief. How this sequence was used by say Shakespeare. That is what is dealt in Thomas De Quincey's Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth, and this is called the Porter scene. Moving on to the other works of Shakespeare. Shakespeare wrote A Winter's Tale, which is a tragic comedy. What is a tragic comedy? A tragic comedy will be half tragic and half comic. At the beginning, you will find a bit of a sorrow atmosphere, but as the story moves on, it reaches a happy ending. So that's a tragic comedy, and this is based on Robert Greene's Pentasco. A Winter's Tale is based on Robert Greene's Pentasco, and Robert Greene, in fact, had denounced or criticized Shakespeare. He went on to say that Shakespeare is a Johannes factotum. He called Shakespeare the only shake scene in the country. And Shakespeare's As You Like It, I believe has been borrowed from the work Rosalind. All right, and the Two Gentlemen of Verona is another work by Shakespeare where the two gentlemen are Proteus and Valentine. In the 20th century, in the first decade of the 20th century, A.C. Bradley came up with the work Shakespearean Tragedy. And in the 18th century, Dr. Johnson came up with a critical document, Preface to Shakespeare. And Shakespeare's Tempest was used as the platform, or was used as a base for The Tempest by John Dryden. It was collaborated. The Tempest by John Dryden was The Tempest by John Dryden was collaborated with William Dagnant. That is William D. Abnett. Okay, and this work has this subtitle. John Dryden's Tempest has a subtitle, The Enchanted Island. And the subtitle for the work, Twelfth Night, is What You Will. And this work opens with the line, If music be the food of love, play on. And Duke Orsino says these words. And here, Viola is disguised as Cesario. And as you all know, during Shakespeare's era, women's role, women were not allowed to act on the stage. Therefore, who took the role of women? It was young boys, very young boys who took up the role of, women characters. And Shakespeare capitalized on this concept. Say for a character to appear as a woman, he need to change his costume and come. All right, and in his original costume, he will be a man, and therefore a character like Viola disguising as a male called Cesario, it makes it that much more easier for the enactment of the play. Therefore, disguise was rather a blessing in disguise, which resulted from the fact that young men played the role of women characters. And in Twelfth Night, you find the twins, Sebastian and Viola. Initially, Olivia was in love with Duke Orsino, but towards the end, Orsino marries Viola and Sebastian marries Olivia. And Henry VIII, the work Henry VIII was completed by Fletcher, and Fletcher also collaborated with Shakespeare to write two noble kinsmen. Shakespeare and Fletcher collaborated to write the work Two Noble Kinsmen. And the character Falstaff appears in Henry IV, Part 1, Part 2, and The Merry Wife of Windsor. And Shakespeare's another important quote that is from Hamlet. Brevity is the soul of wit. And this line is uttered by Polonius in the play Hamlet. And the same line also appears in Francis Bacon's Of Studies. In one of his poems, T.S. Eliot uses the word, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor to be. Alright, so that's a quote which T.S. Eliot uses in the Song of Alfred Prufrock.
Capture button.